This is Chris from Atlantic Outboard, and I'm going to do a digital delivery of a Pursuit DC326. This is a brand new boat, 2022, that just arrived. We have a couple of these units going on the water this spring, so this is going to be extremely helpful for those customers and other customers looking to get into this model. We're going to break down all the bells, all the whistles, tutorial on your first step, what you do when you get on the boat and what you do as you get off the boat. So first step, getting on the boat, you're going to come to your battery panel. You're going to want to turn your batteries on. If you look in the 12 o'clock position, the batteries are off. So the first thing you do is turn them to the on position. A tip, as you start to use the boat, if you're ever in the situation where you're low on voltage, say your kids left the stereo on overnight, you're getting less than 12 volts on your house battery here. What you could do is you can combine the batteries. You actually turn it past that on position to combine batteries here. That'll take all the battery power in the boat. Hopefully if it's enough to get the motor started. Once the motors are starting, they're going to regenerate the battery power there. So normal usage, you're just going to turn it to the on position. Next thing you want to do is turn on your bow thruster. You'll see that light will illuminate. That'll send power to that bow thruster operation joystick at the helm. We'll go through the operation of that next. Down here, you're going to want to make sure your helm electronics on, house main, helm main, and then cockpit amp. The amp is for your stereo. If you're going to be using the toilet, that can stay on. The head macerator, that will be staying off. The only thing that does is give power to overboard discharge your waste. It's very few times people do that. Most of the time you're going to be pumping out at a gas service station. It's a free service, so normally that would be done at the gas dock. Cockpit fridge. The fridge operates on 12 volt power, okay, so it can operate off the batteries. You can leave it on all the time, but it's extremely important to remember, if you're leaving the fridge on overnight, you have to plug the boat into shore power. The shore power will maintain that battery life, and as the fridge uses that juice, it'll keep regenerating with that shore power. If you do not plug in the boat and you have the battery, the fridge on overnight, you'll end up draining your battery. So make sure you plug in if you have your fridge on. Cockpit cooler, if the boat is equipped with a cooler under the seat, your breaker for that is also there. If you ever lose function to like nav anch, cockpit lights, these are all just reset breakers. You'll be able to easily feel that it's tripped. It'll have resistance and you can click it back into place. This is your windlass breaker, okay? Maybe you hang up the anchor on a lobster pot or something and it's really putting a lot of stress on the anchor, and all of a sudden the windlass just stops working. Most likely you've tripped this breaker here. So you're going to want to come back here, reset the breaker, and then you can try hauling the anchor again. So again, first step when you get on your boat, turn your battery switches on, turn your bow thruster on, and then you can go over to the helm. Let's move to the next step. After you get your battery power on, the next step is to come to the helm to prepare the motors for a day on the water. So first thing you need to do is trim your motors down. The button right on your thumb here, up and down, you're just going to trim them all the way down. You'll hear the tone change once they reach their max down position. You'll hear a squeal. Tilt those motors all the way down. And then you're going to come over here and there's a button for power for the ignition. You simply hit power. That's almost like turning the key. It basically turns on the power to that ignition. And then there's going to be another button for start and stop. Hit the button, get those motors fired up. Now it's important that the shifter is in neutral. The boat will not start if that is not in neutral position. The other thing is the boat will not start if your key lanyard is off. The motor will crank, you'll get an alarm, you'll think something's wrong. It's very simple. Make sure this key lanyard is over the button. So two things. Boat's in neutral, key lanyard's on, get those motors started, let them warm up while you're loading gear, getting your guests on board. Next thing you're going to want to do is, before you leave the slip, you already have your breaker on the battery panel for the bow thruster on. Next step is you're going to come up here, hold this button down until the green light illuminates. That gives the bow thruster power. Now you can hit that joystick left and right and it'll activate that bow thruster. It's a good idea to have that on at all times when you're docking in and out of their slip. You may never know when you need it, so as long as it's powered on and ready to go, if you have a situation where you need to make an adjustment, that bow thruster is right there ready for you. Let's continue going through the rest of the components. On your switch panel at the helm, everything is clearly labeled, so most of it's self-explanatory, but let's run through it. You obviously have your horn here, your navigation lights. If you're running in fog or in the evening or in the dark, you're going to want to have your navigation lights on. This boat is equipped with a cockpit courtesy lighting, mid-level lighting, an indirect light. The indirect light is a great add-on feature that Pursuit's doing now. It's this red little LED diode up top here. It's an indirect light, so it's not going to obscure your vision, but at night when you're running the boat, you're going to want to be able to see what these lights, these switches do. So this red light will give you enough illumination on the switch panel to be able to tell what switch you're hitting without obscuring your night vision. We have blank accessory switches here. If you add a component down the road, it could be wired to that switch. Hardtop lighting, you can cycle between red, blue, or white. Another tip, if you ever get out of sync, if one light is red, one light is white, you simply hold that button down and it'll reset that and it'll come back in sync. Spreader lights, there's two different spreader lights on the boat. You're going to have one forward and one aft. One click of the button will turn on the forward, two clicks of the button will turn on all the lights, so forward and aft. This boat is equipped with the underwater lights. Here's another tip. These are the full spectrum Lumitex. If you flip the switch on, it'll start cycling through each color of the spectrum. It'll go white, blue, green, yellow. When you see your desired color, your kids say, "Oh, Dad, I like blue." Simply hit the switch off and then turn it back on. It'll freeze on that color that you shut the switch off on. Again, another accessory switch here. If your boat is equipped with the Make Fast shade, you simply hit the out button and it'll deploy that shade out of the hardtop. Forward bilge, below my feet here, there's a middle sump pump. As you say you rinse out the head compartment, water's going to go into that sump pump because it is below the water line. There is a float switch to that. But if you manually want to pump that out, you just hit that forward bilge pump. Both bilge pumps in the boat are hardwired direct to the battery switch, so even if those, hardwired direct to the battery, so even if those battery switches are off, if you do get water in those compartments, the float switch will kick on and pump that water overboard. Same thing with your aft bilge pump. You can manually activate that with this switch. Fresh water, this is important. Anything fresh water on the boat, your sinks, your toilets, your freshwater shower. This switch has to be on to generate that power. You're going to flip the switch on, it kicks the pump on, and it has an auto off with a pressure. So once it builds pressure, it'll shut that pump on off. So you could keep that switch on all day. Live well, if you catch some a striper or a fluke, whatever, you can throw it into that live well. You flip the switch on, it'll pump seawater into there. Now there will be little plugs that we'll give you with your owner's kit. You could plug that hole and it'll fill up and then it'll have an overflow. So basically that fish will stay alive all day till you're ready to process it at the end of the day. You have your fish box port and starboard. So in the aft of the boat, you'll have fish boxes on either side. A lot of people are using those for fender storage. If you do get water or if you're using it for ice storage and you're ready to discharge that overboard, you simply hold the button down, port or starboard, and a diaphragm pump will pump that waste overboard. Windshield washer. So if you're taking spray, you have crusted up salt on your windshield. You're going to want to make sure your fresh water is on, that freshwater switch which we just talked about. And then you simply hit the freshwater washer. It'll spray pressurized fresh water onto the glass, and then at the same time you hit your port or starboard wiper and it'll wipe that salt, crusted up salt off. You also have windlass controls here to deploy and retrieve. So there'll be two sets of windlass controls in this boat, one at the helm, one on the remote that's attached to the bow. So your remote will come in your owner's kit. Most people are securing it to the bow compartment, so it's always there when you need it. Power steering, this is going to be a blank switch now with these digital electric steering motors. It's no longer power steering, it's digital electric steering. So you can turn this steering wheel all day and nothing's going to happen unless those motors are turned on and the ignition is on. Up here you have your Bluetooth JL audio stereo system. It will do AM, FM. There is an antenna stock from the factory for AM, FM. Most guys are doing Bluetooth streaming. You can play your favorite tunes on there. This boat is being equipped with twin 16-inch displays. The factory does offer 12-inch, but this customer wanted a few extra inches of screen size, so we're going to fill this entire dash out with twin Garmin 8612s. Over here you have your Yamaha 7-inch display. This is going to give you all your engine data, your hours, your RPM, your fuel capacity, etc. Trim tabs are standard featured on this boat. This is a beast of a boat. It doesn't really need tabs, but if you're in a sea condition, you could trim the bow down to get a more stable ride, or if all your guests are standing on one side, you could stabilize the boat by pushing that tab down and it'll even that boat out. This boat is equipped with the ACR spotlight. You simply power it on, and then you'll have a directional key to pan left and right. The joystick is equipped on this boat. So to activate the joystick, there's a button that says joystick. As soon as you hit that, it'll take over from the steering wheel and from the throttles. So you can maneuver this boat any way you please. A tip on the joystick is, I've seen it done a million times, people engage it, put it back to neutral, engage it, put it back to neutral. Engage the joystick and maintain it in gear. Every time it goes back to a rest in the middle where it is now, that goes back to neutral. So I always recommend engage it. You don't have to apply pressure. The more pressure you apply, the more RPM it's going to give you. So engage it and maintain engaged, and you can manipulate that joystick, spin it, forward, back, whatever you need to do to get the boat to respond to where you need to go, sideways, backwards, whatever. It also has a drift point setting to where you can drift down a line. I find the fish point or stay point feature very helpful. If you're by yourself and you need to set up lines and fenders on one side, I always recommend point the motors into the wind or the current. You're going to get the best results from that. And then if you hit stay point, it'll maintain a very small perimeter of where the boat is. It'll maintain that position. It'll allow you to go over, set your fenders, set your lines. This way when you pull into the fuel dock or pull into your slip, you're ready to go. This boat is equipped with the autopilot. When you get the joystick, the autopilot comes standard with it. So heading hold, course hold, very self-explanatory. When we do your sea trial on your first day with water, we'll demo these features with the joystick also. Steering wheel has a tilt. You can find your comfortable ergonomics at the helm. You'll have charge ports on each side. This step will actually deploy down, so it actually gives you a booster step. You have armrests and a flip-up bolster behind you, and there's extra storage. This is a great place to hide your keys, your registration, some miscellaneous tools. Let's continue the rest of the boat. In the Bilge boat, this boat, the DC326, it comes standard with an aft anchor. If you're ever at the beach, you're going to deploy your bow anchor. You could always walk the rear end of the boat back towards the beach, deploy your stern anchor up on the beach, and it'll stay parallel with the beach there. You have a swim ladder that'll deploy off the starboard side with your dive door. That locks into place with the 2 pins. It comes with a dedicated storage holder there. You do have 2 main breakers in the Bilge. If you go to plug in a shore power, which I'll show you soon, and you're not generating power from the dock, you're going to want to make sure that the dock is supplying the power, and then make sure your breaker is not tripped in the Bilge. But as any boat owner, whether it's a 100-foot boat or a 15-foot boat, you want to know where your through-hull fittings are. When you get down into the Bilge, which we'll show on delivery day, you're going to have ball valves, green handle ball valves. These are very similar to something you would see in your basement, so it can isolate water. So this boat will take seawater, supply seawater to your saltwater washdown pump, to your live well pump, to spray off your saltwater with your saltwater washdown, or to keep your catch alive in the live well. If there's ever an emergency situation where you're actually getting water into the Bilge and you shouldn't be, the first thing you're going to want to do is isolate those ball valves. It's just a simple turn, and you would be able to stop the water from coming in. You never know, a fitting may have cracked. The first step is to isolate those, and then service would be able to diagnose what the issue actually was. You do have access to your bilge pumps here. Another new boat problem we see sometimes is the boat was just constructed. There may be fiberglass dust, a piece of plastic in the bilge, and sometimes that float switch gets hung up. So if you're noticing that the bilge pump light is on but it's not pumping water, 90% of the time that bilge pump is hung up with a piece of debris. You simply come in the bilge, locate the bilge pump, just blast it with some hose water, and that should free up that debris. Most of the components in their bilge are for service, but I do want you to know where those through-hull valves are in case of an emergency. Again, our guys will have easy access with the configuration of this bilge. Let's continue on the rest of the components. In the port side stern of the DC326, as you come in the boarding door here, you're going to have a freshwater and saltwater washdown connection. In your owner's kit, you're going to get a quick connection hose that'll plug into either the fresh or the saltwater, and then there's also access to fresh and saltwater washdown in the anchor locker. You also have a freshwater shower back here. Again, to use any of these features, you have to make sure the proper switch on the dash, whether it be saltwater or freshwater, is activated to give pressure to these switches. The boarding door is held closed with a mechanical latch, but then you also have a magnetic latch to keep it open. You have a port side seat. This simply folds out. very sturdy seat, and then you have it paired with a stern extra long seat here with a high backrest. So you can create a very comfortable social zone here. You also have a fixed mount for your table. The table is going to be stored in the head compartment, and the leg will be in the bow or the head compartment. You could swap those table legs, but they can go in here. You have a very nice spacious social area. On either side of the deck, you're going to have your fish boxes with diaphragm pumps that we mentioned at the dash. Let's continue looking at the rest of the components. In the starboard side stern of the DC326, you're going to have your live well. So this is a very deep live well. To activate the water flowing into there, you're going to hit the switch on the dash. There will be a plug that we give you in your owner's bag. A great place to hang that drain plug is on this little hook here. You fill the hole with the plug, flip the switch on, it'll fill up to an overflow line, and then once you hit that line, it'll start discharging that overflow water overboard. You'll be able to keep your catch live all day in there as long as that water flow is continuing. You also have your boarding door. There's a trigger mechanism here. You squeeze that trigger, and then this will swivel open. It is held open by a magnet, and vice versa to close it. Squeeze the trigger, lock it into place. This is where your dive door would, the boarding ladder would go for this dive door. You also have a cooking space up here. Sometimes we get the grill. A lot of the times this is just this cutting board if you don't get the grill. You also have another cutting board here with a freshwater sink. The freshwater switch does have to be activated to use any of these freshwater systems. This is a great place to wine, cheese, entertain. You'll have all your stuff here, plenty of cooking space, make a cocktail, etc. So very good entertainment boat. This boat does just about everything. You could fish it, you could entertain, great day boat. Plenty of space for cup holders. There's tons of cup holders in the whole boat. Let's continue moving forward to the other features. In the mid-bilge of the DC326, you're going to have access to your batteries. They're elevated on a tray. You also have your freshwater tank, your water manifold system. You'll have a mid-sump bilge pump, and then you're going to have an overboard discharge valve. Now that is to open a valve to discharge your waste into the ocean. So most people are using the free pump out service at your fuel dock, but this boat is equipped with your overboard discharge setup. To use that, you will need to turn the breaker on in the battery panel for the head overboard discharge pump. Then you open the valve that is clearly labeled head overboard discharge, and then you're going to go into the head compartment and activate the switch there to discharge that waste overboard. You do have to be 3 nautical miles away from shore in order for that to be legal. We always recommend to use the pump out service at your local fuel dock. Again, it is a free service. So in here is more serviceable components, but you as a boat owner, you should know where these valves are and that there is a pump in here. Another pro tip is always keep your drains clear. This time of the year, we're getting stuff from trees, pollen, etc. It will clog your drains. If you're not clearing the drain with your hose, then it will end up clogging that drain, and then you'll be getting water into this bilge compartment because the gutter won't drain properly. Let's continue forward into the head compartment. In the head compartment of your DC326, you obviously have your toilet. When you want to use the toilet, the lid is held up by this fiberglass lid here. When you're not using it, this comes down and it basically turns into a seat. You also have a tank level indicator. This will monitor the amount of waste in the tank. Obviously, when it gets up to that 4th line, you're full. You really want to plan ahead. If you reach the 3rd line, you're going to want to plan to either overboard discharge like we just explained, or like I recommend, go to your pump out station at your local fuel dock. We were discussing the overboard discharge mechanism with the pump and the switch and the valve. Once you have your switch in the battery panel on and you have the valve in the bilge open, you're going to come down here and you just turn this key and then you hold the button down. That will pump that waste overboard. You also have dedicated storage for your aft table. This locks into place in a tray, and then it's secured with a latch here. And you also have the table leg. There's a few more table legs up in the bow port side, which we'll show you. That's going to be for your bow table. You do have a grab handle in here. There's a towel holder, freshwater sink, chlorine countertops. Here's your light switches here. There is another fire extinguisher in here, and then there's storage here for toilet paper and miscellaneous toiletries. There is a drain in the floor, so if you do have to rinse out, it's not a problem. Just rinse the head out. It'll drain down into the bilge, and then that bilge pump will kick that soapy water overboard. Below deck in the bow area of your DC326 is dedicated storage for your teak table. If you did get the bridge deck teak table option, that'll be stored in the bow, and it will mount midship on the port side across from the helm. So your guests can sit there, have a beverage, wine, cheese again. Down below in the bilge here, you also have your shower sump. We mentioned it before. If you rinse out the head compartment, it will drain down into this sump box. It's called a shower sump box because it is below the water line. The float will recognize the amount of water and it'll discharge that water overboard. This is a great place to keep your life jackets. You can put a Rubbermaid tote with items that you want to make sure they stay dry, but very, very deep storage. Storage for stuff that you don't have to get to necessarily every day, but life jackets and stuff to get them out of the way. Let's continue to look at the storage with your bow storage up in under the cushions. In the bow of the DC326, under your port and starboard cushion, you do have storage. So there's a strap here to access that storage. The hinge will operate 3/4 of the way, and then to actually lock the lid open, you push it a little bit forward and it'll lock in the open position. In your port side, you have dedicated storage for your bow table leg, and then the table leg for your midship teak table is also stored there. You simply take the leg out, drops into the slot, there's a set pin there, and then you could deploy your table. Great social zone up here as well. Great place for dry goods, beach towels, beach chairs, etc. You have a remote point for your JL audio stereo, so you could sit up here, have a drink, and you don't have to get up to change the stereo. You have charge ports. Everybody's got a phone in their hand nowadays, so you could be charging, and you have cup holders everywhere with stereo speakers. Starboard side is wide open storage space as well. Let's take a look at the anchor windlass locker. In the anchor locker of the 326, you have a through stem anchor with a swiveled connector. You're going to want to deploy this. The first thing you have to do is remove the safety chain. Once the safety chain is removed, you can either operate to deploy or retrieve from the helm, or up here there's a remote that comes in your owner's kit that has a holder. I always tell people they can use some 3M double-sided tape, secure that to the hull side so that remote is always there, or you could have one of our technicians drill a hole and secure it with a screw. Once you remove that safety chain, you can use a remote, deploy the anchor. You also have a freshwater and saltwater washdown point up here, again with the quick connection hose. You plug that in there. You could spray any muck or seaweed off your anchor after it comes up. You do have a light in this compartment. When you have your courtesy lights on, it will activate this, so in the evening when you have your courtesy lights on, you'll be able to see what's going on up here. Very deep space, not a space that you're going to want to use for any additional storage. This is dedicated storage for your anchor rode to operate the windlass. In the port side storage or berth compartment of your DC326, you do have some charge ports. You do have storage. It's a little coat closet, drawer storage. You actually have a wireless charge point for your phone, a USB charger. This is a CO2 detector. It does have an internal battery similar to your house. If you start hearing it chirping after a couple of years of use, it's probably the battery. It is a good idea to open up your doors to make sure it's not CO2, but most of the time it's just going to be a low battery alarm. This is a generic panel here. Most of these boats aren't getting a generator, but if you did have a generator, your generator controls would be down here. When you do plug in the boat after a day on the water to charge it, you do want to just come down here on this display, this Blue Sea system display. You'll see voltage coming from the dock. You want to make sure you see that before you leave the boat to ensure that you're actually getting power from the dock. Again, this is a generic panel. If you did have AC and cooling pumps, etc., all those breaker switches would be here. So this is great storage. You could put all your miscellaneous sports goods in here, but if you did have to crash over for the night, spend the night somewhere, you do have a seat that deploys to be a bed. In this compartment is also dedicated storage for your bow table. This is a very large table. You notice you have snaps underneath it. So if you're not using it as a table, it also is a filler. So it's the platform. It'll go up in that bow seating. You'll see a lip that supports it, drops in there, and then you put your cushion, a dedicated cushion that comes with the boat, and it'll snap in here so that cushion doesn't fly out. You'll be able to turn that whole bow area into one big day bed. You also have additional rod holder storage here. You slide the butt end of your rod that way, the tip goes this way, and you simply turn these to lock it into place. You do have a light switch down here. Great storage. well done job. You can actually spend the night down here if you needed to. On the port side at the helm, you have great wraparound style seating. There's grab handles, there's flip down armrests, you have cup holders. If you chose the teak table option, that would deploy right here. Great place to put your beverage or your snack while you're underway. Now a little overview of your motor and the transom of the boat. These are the new generation Yamaha 300s. There is these warning lights. You see 4 little LED diodes here back in the cowling. What that is when you're activated in joystick mode, these lights will flash to warn people around you that joystick mode is actually activated. After a day on the water, it's always recommended to flush your motor. While you're scrubbing down the boat, soap and water, you're going to want to hook up a garden hose to your motor. The motor is to be tilted in the upright position. The motor is to be off, and then you're going to want to start flushing it. To flush it, you simply unscrew this fitting here, screw the garden hose in, and then turn the water on the garden hose. I did find a little trick. You go to your local hardware store, they do make garden hose quick connection systems. If you set up a quick connection here, it saves you a tremendous amount of time instead of unscrewing this every time. So if you talk to Chris at Atlantic myself, I could certainly guide you on what quick connection system to get. The new motor is beefed up with a new trim mechanism. They rerouted the exhaust, and again, it's an awesome new radical design with these elevated decals. So great new product by Yamaha, and I'm glad Pursuit has them on the back of this boat. The portside transom, the DC326, you have one of your swim ladders. This is a great design. Some people aren't so sure about the design, but then I explain it to them, they really get it. If you're ever in an emergency situation, you're out in the water by yourself, you fall overboard, you're possibly injured. Most ladders to get back in the boat, you have to undo a lid. It's never going to happen, especially if you're injured. This is a huge safety feature. So to board this boat, if you're in the water, you simply pull this pin, the ladder telescopes out of the transom, and then you deploy your steps. Now you have access to the boat. And in reverse, close your steps, and it locks back in place. Great design. This is Chris from Atlantic Outboard, and that was our digital delivery of the Pursuit DC326. Be sure to visit us at atlanticoutboard.com. Stop in our shop, 475 Boston Post Road, Westbrook, Connecticut, and make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.